ma lo se ko manuia ina fiona titia fa tai ine na wenga tawo mo tai tunu ia fa para fa fo il tato o fina wenga me se fo ia le ucho o le mana le te ta no ati ia to bai meni ma lo le tua ma tvela fa pena ko il tau tua bai ile tunu ile aso me le aso ia ma le tunu ia e ave pegbi ina le tua fa tai fo i uno bota tu ia me ne aso me ni tu la io na lo come lo na ngane lei tala pa tu le ko ngam pa ia le tua me sta man kina ma tua lo pa ponga mai o la fo pana uchi la tu lo pa ponga mai lunga pe fa ilangi po te la val vai no te lo pe lo pa ponga mai ai pa malo le tawata i pa tai fo i le fa ponga mai ta to program tu sa o tu nei mai le United States of America wa po do si le fia i no lo tu pa pe ta tu tangata ya me se fo i Samoa o lo ta le ai le sua pa pe lo ta tu nu ono lo telefone no lo tu nei vai no te lo pe ia o mo tu sia no i te tasi o te tai tasi po i Samoa o longa po i ma tati e nei paanga o le fatar pa tu mo tu se tasi tu mal pa ni le me kutai au titia le sungali a Verona sangato monga o e ba tu fatai fo i fa no non tenta wono e pisi le fo i mai tai Samoa o Verona sangato mongo se fai pulo con tu la fono sete o Utah mai le tu malo fa palota numero 2 su tasi House of Representative District 31 o le sui al Partito Democrat mai to lua la vai la tu la ua to tonu o le telefono fai tu la fono Utah ma le pati la paleta si o lato maluei lalo te mai tai fo i fai pisnisi ma na fanau ma se come o ia ka huku i Hawaii i le na o ngai no matu le BYU la ie ma la le fasino ya fa ma wala sloi sangato malona fa le tu langi sangato lo la nei te o Utah e dina ya Verona o tau lu e fo le upo fu le pa ia Solomona pa tau tu se fu le te ipoto e fa fie lon tama vale fa no lon tina ya ai wa ba ia fo ia tulanga au sie nei fo tina nei fo tama tai Samoa sini leo le tele ta tu no mai ai po matu na wasa mai ba se tele ina ia fa onga ka nau ina ia maua su mana i manuia Verona se mai tai Samoa mo le e continente i America po continental USA wa Australia matatia wa ve o yam te tai stone o fono fa tu la fono al este o Utah se tasio alo Samoa e ko yo check a fitman le district po le tu malo fa ana te numero fa lo i ko sono fa tu la fono este Utah tu sa familiona tanga to lo no foi ma le mo foi o le la mo po capital Salt Lake ma le mo foi le palesio Yesu Cristo la pa yo so ngatai ya po le mamona pe o ma senel to tele o stete tua o Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada. Ya mai sa ka sang mai foi il sume Verona tem foi ma fa ti ma tan ngana ngana English ono le ngana le ya na fa so mai menino le ya ko i mazu o le tinu e fa tala fa to il sume Verona sangato mon Talofa and welcome on air to Radio Samoa, Verona, Representative Verona.
Talofa, and thank you all for having me on your radio station today. It's quite the honor to be here and to just converse with you today.
It's an honor for us to have you want to start a journey of a Samoan, of any Samoan woman in the U.S. To be selected or be elected into office, especially House of Representative legislature there in the state of Utah. And can you talk a little bit about growing up, your family? I know you started out in Hawaii and California, ended up in Utah. And about your siblings and your parents.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, my parents moved from Samoa. They're living in Mokopa and Lepea and went to BYU for school. From there, we traveled to California, and when I was about 12 years old, we moved to Utah. Utah has been home ever since. But I grew up in a family where we were very close to Heavenly Father, and I had very hardworking parents, sometimes working more than 2 jobs at a time. And my parents also made Samoan food out of our home, and my siblings and I would take those kekapua'a and painipopo and half moon pies to the park, and we would sell them. We now have a family business, Auto Bakery and Cafe. But just being a part of a family that worked together to make things happen and to support each other is a big reason why I got involved in politics. Serving the community and working together as a group and as a team, as a village, is something that I'm very familiar with, and that all my siblings are. And so I got involved in community organizing from a very early age. My background is working in mental and behavioral health, and then I'll share a little bit about my siblings. One of my siblings is a high-ranking officer in the Air Force, and the rest are all business owners. I have a sister in real estate who does really well. But when I decided I was going to run for office, it was a family decision. It was something that we prayed about as a family, and I talked with my husband and son, and my mom and dad and my siblings were also very much a part of that decision, because we knew that running for office and serving in this big capacity meant that we would have to come together as a family and support each other.
I know Utah State is the deep red Republican state. And what made you decide to run as a Democrat? I noticed also that another Samoan also, Jake Victorman, is also a Democrat. What makes you decide? Well, what's the difference, in terms of, legislation and in that state with Utah?
Growing up, my dad always instilled in us that having a voice and sharing your opinion, and that all perspectives were important. And so I think it's the same with being in government. In order to truly serve our communities and to effectively and efficiently serve them, then all voices need to be brought to the table. And I think for me, it was really important that I could be a voice for many in our community who you'll never see go up to the Capitol, who may not even vote or even recognize yet what the power of their voice means and how important their opinions and values are. And so when I'm at the Capitol and we're making laws and having important conversations, those are the voices that I bring with me to the table. It's the voices that are often unheard and just aren't represented in meaningful ways. And so for me, even though I am a Democrat living in a conservative state, I also know that we share a lot of the same values and we all want the same thing. We just have different ideas on how to get there.
When you decided to run, what were the most critical needs of our community?
I've done a lot of work in our community, and so I've been able to see some of the disparities and gaps. And we have one of the biggest needs is healthcare and education and financial stability. And so even as I've been running for office, I've had many conversations with many of my constituents and knocked on thousands of doors, and that's where families were able to share with me what's most important to them. And right now we're living in a political climate where we need to come together more than ever. But I am hearing that people are struggling financially. Our economy is not in the best shape. And so when I'm up at the Capitol making votes and passing laws, those are the things I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about our economy and our families able to put food on the table, and do we have quality education, and what are the supports that we have for healthcare and people who need care and don't have that accessible to them.
You're also a co-founder of a nonprofit organization called Mother. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that experience also, helped or helped you, what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so Le Malu, I've always worked in nonprofit. Le Malu is a nonprofit that my sisters and cousins got after we all got our Malus. And you know, the word Malu means to protect and shelter. And I did this with my sisters and my Burgess and Frost and Mangalay cousins. And the reason why we felt this was important is because we have so many organizations, but we don't have enough organizations that focus on the values of our Samoan culture. And I think when we can combine Samoan cultures and the values that we have as Americans, like for Samoans and Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, it brings about a strength and a power that sometimes is hidden because we don't focus on what is innately within us, which is the strength of our communities and our ancestors and the cultural and village values that we're raised by here in the States by our Samoan parents. And so this nonprofit was very important to us because there are a lot of issues that we can address, and there are ways to empower our communities and our people to get involved civically and in many other ways. But if you don't know the value of who you are and where you come from and your roots, it's hard to stay focused on what's important and what your purpose is.
Mm-hmm. In your own state, you know, with the new administration right now from Washington, are there any impacts, or you know, what's going on, and how do you see that impact?
You know, we are starting to see the impact of what's going on a federal level trickle down to the state level, and just last week we had healthcare providers and community health workers laid off of their jobs because the funding has been cut. And they're doing very important work in the health community. Health care workers are doing a lot of work. Mental health workers are doing much needed work. And those jobs have been cut and just very abruptly, which is not a good thing for our communities. There has to be some transition that we do if we're going to cut funding. I think that there are a lot of places where federal funding absolutely needs to be cut, but we also have to be very smart about how we do it. Right now, people are unable to get the care that they expect to receive, and again, it's just been abruptly cut off. And when you start to see stuff like that happen, it's not good for our communities, and it's marginalized and vulnerable communities who will see the impacts of that first and in the most harshest ways. And so, yes, we are seeing that happen in different areas and different departments. I definitely think there needs to be a smoother transition plan and a more thoughtful way of doing this because, like I said, there are areas that definitely need to be cut where we're overspending, but it can't happen so quickly and so abruptly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you see the future of politics with Samoans in Utah, or in general?
Yeah, you know, running for office, I've been involved in Utah politics since 2010. There aren't many Samoans involved in this area. Samoans are doing a lot of really great things in this state. Government is a place where we lack representation. But when I ran for office and when Representative Jacob Fiti-Simanu ran for office, what we saw is our community come out in large numbers. And again, I'm a Democrat, but when I had my campaign kickoff, all Samoans showed up, and it didn't matter what their party affiliation is. People just showed up to represent someone, to support someone who looks like them, who shares their values and same lived experiences. And a lot of people who are not Samoan who saw this and were saying things like, why are Republicans showing up to a Democrat event? And it was something I had to share with them and explain to them. I said that in our community, we see each other first before we see any party affiliation. And so I let them know to expect that for the rest of my campaign, we will see Republicans and unaffiliated, and it didn't matter what party people belong to. We support each other first. And so that was such a beautiful experience for me to have. I know it was very similar for Representative Fitu Manu, that our communities just showed up until the very end. And now we have many of them who work with us, like as staff, as volunteers, and they are very much a part of the work that we're doing. And so I fully expect to see more Samoan representation, not just in Utah, but across the country.
Mm-hmm. I know your work, it's hard, but it even makes it harder when you see it in social media, a lot of misinformation. What other kind of misinformation do you think that is not contributing to good governance, especially, within our people? What kind of misinformation? Can you address that, or you don't see that as a problem?
There's a lot of misinformation. So what we're seeing happen is we'll have legislation or a bill come out, and it's not just our community, everyone does this, is where they take it and they put their own perspective and their own spin and opinion, and then it gets really negative and just muddled in this space that's no longer accurate, and you're so far away, so far removed from what the actual truth is. And so you see that happening. It's almost like gossip, where there is the truth, and then the more it gets passed down, it just becomes something that it never was. And so you see that happening, and that's the part where when I'm talking to constituents is you have to remind people to stay focused on the facts and really look at things from the lens of how do we make things better, what is the negative impact of this bill, what is the positive impact of it, because people like to stretch things so far away from what it really is. But as far as I think just be really thoughtful about your news sources and where you're getting your information from. Once it becomes like second, third, fourth, fifth-hand information, it's not accurate anymore. And so if you hear something, look for a legitimate news source. And I know it's hard to find that anymore, but really try and find a news source that is not biased and can report information based on the actual words and facts.
Yeah, it's it's funny, in the past several decades, I have been dead 3 times already. It's misinformation. I mean, that's how funny it is. It's just unbelievable. Yeah. but anyway, I know your time is important. You're busy. What's your advice to young people that are growing up? Role modeling, mentorship?
I think right now, like for kids, one thing, growing up, I always paid attention to current events. So there's something about having the awareness of what's going around you, because once you have that awareness, you have the ability to care about your community. And so for those who are thinking about getting involved, the best way to start is to start in your churches, start serving in those ways, serve your neighbors, serve your family, serve your community. And as you get older, you'll find opportunities to continue serving. For students, political science, public administration is always a good area of focus when you know already you want to get into government or politics. I think history is a great place to start because, as you know, history often repeats itself. And so when we could be knowledge of the history and what has happened and what worked and what didn't, that is also a very helpful tool for you when you're serving your communities and your government.
Representative Rona Samoa, I'll give you the last 45 minutes and your last thoughts on our program and for our listening audience, Samoa community.
Thank you so much for having me. Again, it was really great. It's always great to talk to community and people who are sharing information to empower Samoans all over nationally on a global level. So again, thank you for having me. I would say, just to end our conversation, everything starts from your values and from your family and how you're raised. And as we continue to serve during these tumultuous times, it's always good to just reground yourself and stay focused on where you come from and where your values stem from.
One, thank you very much, for your time. And that's on air and on Radio Samoa. We're very privileged and honored to have you with us this morning or afternoon in Utah. Ya, Samoa ultan ranganda ba le sunga ilipipule Verona sanga tumonga mai liseto ita ilinita iko so postala la ne ay nga mga selo la ona abo tingin nei so fuwa mai mbia